Hi, good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, and so I guess we can go ahead and get started. If you feel so inclined, I'd love to, have you put your name and where you're from in the chat box. This is a webinar if you've attended ours in the past. So your microphones have been muted right now, and if you have any questions, just please go ahead and put those in the chat box. This webinar today, Florida Friendly Certifications has been approved for one FNGLA, one Florida Waterstar, LAIF, DBPR, CEU. If you do want a CEU, there's a $10 administration fee. And I'll put that link in the chat box a little later if you haven't already registered. I appreciate I'm seeing all these names coming in from across the state. So thank you for doing that. I know the sun's a little bright on me, and hopefully it will move here in about 10 minutes or so it won't be so blinding. With that, I think I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to be the presenter today. So you've got me for the next hour, and I really do want to encourage you to put any questions you have in the chat box, because there'll be time at the end, I think, for a good dialogue if you have any questions. So I'm going to talk about the certification programs. I'm going to go over a little bit of background on the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program and talk about available resources, and just really answer any questions that you might have on Florida Friendly. Happy Thanksgiving to you too. And this program, Florida Friendly Landscaping, is funded by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and we're implemented through UF IFAS Extension, and we're housed under the Center for Land Use Ecology, and that's where we stand. So I'd like to start off with a little background. And Florida Friendly Landscaping Program is a science-based approach to maintaining an attractive, diverse, and more sustainable landscape. The goals are to conserve water and protect water quality. We were started in 1991 as a grassroots program through the Marine Resources Council. And this was in response to water quality decline in the Indian River Lagoon in just one single community. And so now today, this program has grown with the support of FDEP and 319 grants. We're active in 54 counties throughout the state. So I think that's a great testament to what, a small group of people can do when they work together and put their minds, to solving some issues. And then, as many of you may or may not know, Florida Friendly Landscaping has 3 sub-programs. Each of these programs teaches the same 9 principles, but they provide targeted education to each different audience. So the Florida Yards and Neighborhoods program targets homeowners, gardeners, and youth. The Florida Friendly Communities targets municipalities, builders, developers, and property managers. And the Green Industries Best Management Practices targets the landscape maintenance professionals. And I'll talk just a little bit more about the Florida Friendly Communities program, as that's the program that I'm the statewide coordinator for. And it's kind of a new program. So we work with stakeholders responsible for community development and redevelopment at the community level. And so in addition to promoting and providing education to the traditional 9 principles, we promote the use of green infrastructure and Florida Friendly at the local governmental level. This program is implemented through 2 coordinated efforts. The public-facing or non-technical branch will target decision makers. These include planners, developers, elected officials, and other large-scale design professionals. The technical education will focus on educating individuals responsible for designing and constructing and maintaining these projects, and it'll provide specific information needed to implement green infrastructure. And this portion of the program will be led by Dr. Evan Bean, and he's with the Department of Agricultural and Biological Engineering. So we'll be working together to really move this Florida Friendly Communities program forward. These are the 9 principles of Florida Friendly Landscaping. And the mission really is to educate Floridians about environmentally friendly landscaping practices and encourage them to conserve and protect our water resources by applying these 9 principles. So hopefully you've seen these principles before. We've got right plant, right place, water efficiently, fertilize appropriately, mulch, protect wildlife, manage yard pest responsibly, recycle yard waste, reduce stormwater runoff, and protect the waterfront. So these Florida-friendly landscaping principles were found to be so compelling that they've even been written into the Florida state legislation. And I'll talk a little bit about each one of these. The first one, Florida Statute 373.185, is the legislation that impacts local governments, HOAs, and residents. This legislation defined Florida-friendly landscapes as quality landscapes that conserve water, protect the environment, are adaptable to local conditions, and are drought tolerant. And it encourages water management districts to implement incentive programs for local governments to adopt Florida-friendly landscaping ordinances. It also states that homeowners associations and local governments ordinances may not prohibit Florida-friendly landscaping. The statute previously read that they could not prohibit xeriscaping, but this term was replaced with Florida-friendly landscaping because Florida is not an arid climate, where you would see xeriscapes. We go through both periods of heavy rain and drought conditions, so Florida-friendly is really a more appropriate term. But one thing to keep in mind with this legislation is that it does not invalidate HOA or local government restrictions. I'm sorry, I'm looking at a question from Diane, and it says, what is the Florida statute requiring the state to provide agricultural water from Lake Okeechobee? I do not know that. It is not a Florida friendly statute, so I'm just not well versed on that. So due to this legislation that I just talked about, many Florida counties, cities, and HOA communities have incorporated Florida-friendly language into their codes and covenants. And often this language will specify to only use plants that are on the FFL plant list. And I just want to remind everybody, this is just a great step. You need to keep in mind that even if a plant is on our list, it still needs to be the right plant for the right place. So, looking at the growing conditions is first and foremost, the most important thing to do. Some other counties, like Alachua County, has adopted a Florida-friendly landscaping code to help homeowners and HOA communities work together to implement Florida-friendly landscapes. In this code, they take an active role in mediating the disputes between the two groups. Other counties have, addressed these issues in a different way. But this is just some of the way that FFL is incorporated into local government. And as I mentioned at the start of this, FFL is a science-based program. And as such, we're always striving to learn more. And so I'm going to go over just a few of the few examples of the research that we've done lately. And I'll talk about each of these 3 very briefly. So the first one I'm going to discuss is FFL landscape water use. Our team of experts has recently completed this study that compared a traditional landscape, which was 75% turf grass and 25% plant bed, with what we're calling a Florida-friendly landscape, which was 75% plant bed and 25% turf. The Florida-friendly had an efficient irrigation system, and it included micro irrigation in the plant beds. And the traditional had just, a single zone of rotors irrigating the entire landscape. And as you can see, the water savings was pretty impressive. It was 83% reduction in water use of the Florida-friendly landscape versus the traditional. And I know I, for one, was concerned, about the maintenance. But we took a look at that as well. And we saw that pretty much between the Florida Friendly, which is this white bar, and the traditional Florida Landscape, which is the hatch bar, that the mowing and the hand weeding pretty much canceled each other out. They were, basically a wash. And then over time, you would hope that, or you would expect, I think, that the hand weeding will go down, once the plants have grown into their full, mature size. So, so that study has just recently been published, and we'll give you the link to that in the notes. Another research that was recently completed was the estimated water savings potential of Florida-friendly landscaping activities, and we developed a table that address these issues with and it also has this document here, this AES 15. Also goes into the what am I trying to say? The assumptions and the research behind each one of these findings that they came up with. So just to briefly go over the table from that document, you can see here that if you simply reduce your irrigation from 3 days a week to 2 days a week, you can expect to save over 10,000 gallons of water per 1,000 square feet a year. Or if you converted spray head nozzles to multi-stream, multi-trajectory nozzles, you can expect to save over 2,800 gallons of water per 1,000 square feet a year. So both of these are pretty easy things to accomplish. The MSMTs is a relatively easy retrofit. You just replace the nozzles, and these nozzles, are a more efficient irrigation system. They have a slower water output with heavier droplets, and that allows the soil to actually absorb the water, reducing evaporation and misting. So this tool we think is a helpful, or this table we think is a helpful tool to, for you to decide what activities that you want to do in your landscape and how you will, kind of find the biggest bang for the buck in your own landscape or in the landscape that you're maintaining for others. This is another research that we did on landscape preferences. So this study just kind of involved, what type of landscape do you prefer to look at or to have? And so you can see in the first one was really, there wasn't really much landscape at all. On this option 2, there was a 25% landscape. Option 3 is about 50% landscape, bed versus turf. 4 is 75% landscape bed and 25% turf, like our research examples. And then option 5 is 100%. Do you feel like if, I'd love to see which one that you prefer. If you want to type that in the chat box, option 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And I'll tell you what the research said. Okay, I'm seeing some 4s and some 5s. Wonderful. I love seeing all these come through. So I'm seeing a lot of 4s and 5s, and what the research came out with was 3 and 4 were the most preferred, and then with I think option 2 and 5 coming in right behind that. I think this is great to have, to understand that people do really, appreciate, a larger landscape bed, in their, on their property, and it can help increase home values as well. So the study had option 3 as the most, and then option 4 was a very close second. So y'all did great. So next, I'd like to talk about some of the resources that we have available. I'll talk about some of the publications, some of the trainings, and some model landscape documents that we have available. So we have a lot of educational materials available to encourage more sustainable landscaping practices. The publications on this page are the foundation of the program. The Florida Friendly Landscaping Guide to Plant Selection and Landscape Design lists FFL plants and their growing requirements, as well as some possible design solutions for common landscape issues. The Florida Yards and Neighborhoods Handbook describes in detail the 9 principles of FFL and how to maintain a landscape for the home audience. And the Florida Friendly Best Management Practices for the Protection of Water Resources by the Green Industries teaches the 9 principles to the professional landscape community. So these publications are all available free of charge and can be ordered on our website. So, if you don't already have a copy, please go ahead and, go to our website and you can order your own copy. You'll see this is the new design of the manual. We'll be updating these 2 manuals with a similar look in the future. So we really appreciate this, nice new kind of clean look to that, that one. So we've developed materials specifically for HOA communities, and some of these include model language for codes, covenants, and restrictions. We have model language for architectural review boards and model language for communities that are updating their landscape maintenance contracts. So these documents incorporate the latest IFAS recommendations and can be downloaded from our website, and you can modify them as needed. And so that's their intent, is that you just download them and make them work for your community. We also have a publication on frequently asked questions of the FFL legislation, and we will provide in-person trainings on communities and the benefits of FFL and how to make their communities more sustainable. We also offer at least 1 training a year on the Florida Statute 373.185, and where we, kind of clear up some miscommunication and some, misunderstandings regarding that legislation. So if you live in a community, or if you're working with a community that you think would, benefit from some of our trainings or some of our materials, definitely you can reach out to me. You can go to our website, and just know that we have these resources available, for communities. We also have specialized training for builders and developers, and these include, we have resources for builders and developers. These include professional trainings. We have continuing education opportunities, and then we have site consultations. We also have resources for implementing green stormwater infrastructure in new and existing communities. We have model code documents, and we offer a new resident folder with information on how to maintain their Florida friendly landscape and how to contact their local UF IFAS extension office. So these are also other resources I'd like you to keep in mind if you're a builder or working in a new community. And then for FFL for local governments, we have specialized training for local governments, including implementing green stormwater infrastructure, GIBMP training for local governmental staff and employees, and also Florida Friendly Landscaping Certified Professional training. Other resources we have for local governments include H2O Save. This is a water conservation program, and Data Hub that provides water use to help with targeted water conservation campaigns. We have a model ordinance for Florida-friendly fertilizer use on urban landscapes. We have example incentive programs with anything from plant giveaways to irrigation retrofits. If you want to implement an incentive program in your community, we can definitely help with that. And we also have an example ordinance for compost amending soil in urban landscaping. So there's a guidance document that goes with that. We have the ordinance that I just mentioned, and then we also have a field sheet with practical instructions for amending urban soils. And that research is showing that these amended soils are, requiring less water for plant establishment, and the plants are thriving in these amended soils. So that can be another webinar in the future, all on its own. Another resource that we have available is the Florida Green Stormwater Infrastructure website. This is created and hosted by FDEP. It's intended to be a clearinghouse for Florida-specific green stormwater infrastructure resources. There's a lot of GSI and low impact development, LID information from other states. What we haven't seen is very many examples of Florida specific. And I think, we all know that Florida is its own beast. It's just very different than our northern states. So it's really exciting that we're developing this website. It's going to be live in probably, by the end of the year. I really expect it to be live any time now, but it is, it's in its pilot right now. And so it'll have examples of, kind of the why and the how of GSI, and it'll also have examples of other, where GSI has been implemented. So, we'll continue to populate, these different, sites around the state where green stormwater infrastructure has been implemented. So those can be things like, here we have some examples here. We have permeable pavement, we have living shorelines, we have stormwater improvement projects. So those are all different types of examples of GSI that will be continuing to promote and help communities implement. This website will also house this NonPoint source publication tool. So this tool is pretty exciting. It lets you pick what type of educational topic that you want to have. It will let you pick a subtopic. It'll let you pick your audience, if it's homeowners or general public. What type of material. So this example here is a door hanger, but it could be a flyer or it could be a social media post. And then there's several different messages that you can select from, and then you can put your own logo on there and print the materials yourself. So the audience for this really is, it could be extension agents, it could be local governments that don't have a big graphics department already set up. So there's images and pre-approved messaging that you can customize your own publications with. So we're excited about that too. And that you'll be able to find on that GSI webpage as well. And so a few more resources that we have available online. I'll go ahead and I'll talk about those. So we've developed, several mobile web applications. Those include the FFL Plant Guide, a Florida Fertilizer Ordinance, Toxic Plants, and the FFL Butterfly Gardens app. We also have an FFL Bee Garden app as well. So the Butterfly and the Bee Garden app provides, host and nectar plants for butterflies. It provides sample planting designs for small, medium, and large butterfly gardens. And it also, the butterfly one is great because it'll show you the larval form. You'll see that the caterpillar and then what type of butterfly it grows into. So you can identify the caterpillars. If you're having to remove anything from your landscape, you'll make sure that you're not removing say a monarch caterpillar when you probably don't want to be doing that. The Toxic Plant app includes over 200 plants that can be filtered by whether it's toxic to people, pets, or livestock, and it can also be filtered by the symptoms of poisoning. And I'm going to show a slide on the FFL Plant Guide. So all these apps are free and available from our website. You can find a link to them. This app here that I'm going to talk about now is also available on iOS or Apple, from the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, where you can download it. And so the plant guide is pretty great. It's got over 400 Florida friendly plants, and it works pretty much as you would expect a app to work. You can filter it by what type of plant you're looking for. So if you're looking for a ground cover that'll grow, say, in partial shade, and that's a native, you can just plug those search filters in. It'll default to your zip code that you put in the beginning. So this is my zip code. And then you'll get a list of plants that match those criteria. And then say you want more information, it'll I selected twin flower, and then you can go in there and you can, find out, more information about that plant. You can find out how big it gets, how tall and wide it gets, what type of soil characteristics it likes and things like that. So that's a great resource. And once again, it's free, and you can download this on the Google Play or the Apple Store, or you can go to our website and also access that. The Fertilizer Ordinance app is designed primarily for professional maintenance personnel to help them keep track of all the various city and county fertilizer ordinances. And it does this by using Google Maps to pinpoint the location and any fertilizer restrictions or requirements that are in place there. So that's a handy app to have. Webinars, y'all know about the webinars if you're here today, so that's great. We're going to continue. We're right now putting together our topics and scheduling our speakers for next year. We'll continue to offer CEUs for these professional series webinars. As I mentioned earlier, we have continuing education, and it's really just online training available. And we have 8 different classes that are available online. They do offer CEUs for landscape architects, community association managers, FNGLA, Florida Waterstar, LAIF, and FDACS. But also anybody can take these classes and just learn more about Florida-friendly landscaping. We also have, lawn and landscape BMPs for professionals. We have a turf grass one. I don't have an image of it over here, but we're going to continue to add on to these online modules that you can take anytime, so they're self-paced, and you can just take them at your own convenience. We also started a Hire Florida Friendly campaign, and we did this in conjunction with, the industry professionals and, of course, DEP. But what we wanted to do is point people into the direction of hiring professional landscape folks to take care of their landscape and, to design and maintain it. So we have a list of, recommended certificates and certifications for landscape professionals. We have a checklist for hiring a landscape professional where they can, look at the checklist and have some questions that they might want to ask before they hire someone. So really, this is just a guide, just really trying to support these other certifications and education that's out there and available. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about FFL recognitions and certification programs. So I'll start out with talking about the Florida Friendly Landscape Recognitions. We offer a home landscape recognition, we offer commercial, a new construction, and we are developing a neighborhood recognition, which I'm also very excited about, which will be new for next year. We'll be pilot testing that. For the home recognition, I'm not going to go over the checklist in detail, but I do want to clarify a few points. This checklist is for recognition and not certification. So we recognize home landscapes. Certification is just a whole different, level of evaluation criteria. So the checklist is available for 24 months. And it must be compliant with the most recent checklist that's available on the website. And you can download, you can go to our website and you can download the checklist to make sure you're using the current one. And the FFL program, this one's kind of new, has the sole and absolute discretion to award or deny any landscape recognition. This kind of came about because some people would try to find, loopholes and different ways around our checklist. But, basically it is up to the extension agent following these recommendations to award or deny landscape for FFL recognition. And then also, once a landscape is recognized, if they fail to maintain it according to UF IFAS recommendations and the checklist criteria, the recognition can be revoked at that time as well. So those are kind of a few of the finer points on the checklist. The process goes, as I mentioned, you go to the website and you download the checklist, and take that checklist and, walk around your landscape, or, if you're at a commercial landscape at the site, walk around, see if you think that the site is eligible for recognition. Then you would go ahead and contact your county extension office for them to come out and perform the recognition with you. This is a pretty straightforward process. It doesn't take a whole long time to do the recognition or make the appointment with the agent. Some counties do not offer FFL recognition, and if that's the case, so I'm thinking of Orange County right now, I don't believe they offer a recognition. You would go ahead and contact the state office, and you can see if we can work together on that. This is our new landscape flag that we've just finished. It should be on the way to our offices now. It's being printed. We used to have a sign that you could put in your yard, but we've changed to a flag with this custom art design on it. And we think that this will allow, people living in an HOA community to be able to have a recognition flag in their landscape. It'll have a tag on it indicating if you received silver level or gold level recognition and the year that it was recognized. So we're very excited about our new flag. Oh, here we go. So I'm going to play this video. Hopefully I turned on the sound. If you don't hear the sound, let me know and I'll just reshare it and get the sound on it.
Florida-friendly yards come in many different shapes and sizes. Some highly
all right, I don't know if I don't think we're going to get the sound on that because
it was working for me.
Oh, was it? I just don't hear it then. Okay, I'll go ahead and play.
and conventional, with others exhibiting a more natural style like that of Florida's native landscapes. Regardless of the style, how the yard is maintained determines whether it is truly Florida-friendly and can be protected. In 2009, the Florida State Legislature passed the Florida-Friendly Landscaping Law. The law was designed to promote quality landscapes that conserve water, protect the environment, are adaptable to local conditions, and are drought tolerant. While some laws are quite self-explanatory, others are more complex with varying criteria for compliance. For those not trained in horticulture, irrigation, landscape design, or pond management in the FFL principles, interpretation of the law can become problematic. While the state statute does not provide specific criteria for evaluation, it does state that homeowners and commercial properties must follow local laws and ordinances, as well as any rules, covenants, and deed restrictions. When faced with homeowners, HOA board members, landscape management companies, attorneys, and disputes among those of the general public, it's easy to fall into the trap of trying to interpret a rather vague law, leaving persons open to legal consequence. Without proper training and resources, this is a risky proposition. The most legitimate resource relies upon fact-based scientific studies and the Florida-friendly landscaping principles for which the statute is named. Condensed into one easy-to-use resource is the Florida-Friendly Home Recognition Checklist. Originally designed for use in the Florida-Friendly Yards Recognition Program for rewarding water and wildlife protection and conservation in the design and maintenance of properties, the recognition checklist can be deployed as a simple yet effective tool to determine whether a property is Florida-friendly. Comprised of a checklist, the tool helps the user first determine whether there are HOA or code violations. If there is a violation, the property in question is automatically disqualified from being recognized as Florida-friendly, regardless of the other criteria on the checklist, although recognition is possible later once those violations are corrected. Beyond that question, the user can progress through a series of sections highlighting the 9 FFL principles and the overall maintenance level. The FFL Home Recognition Checklist, regardless of the county or municipality in question, takes into consideration those laws, ordinances, and HOA restrictions. University of Florida Extension agents can provide education and technical assistance regarding the FFL law and the use of the FFL Home Recognition Checklist as the best tool in evaluation of Florida-friendly landscape compliance, regardless of size, style, or location. For support and technical assistance, please refer to the Florida-Friendly Landscaping Program website for access to training and CEU opportunities and the FFL mobile web apps.
Okay, I'm glad y'all could hear that. That was kind of strange. I couldn't hear a thing. Hopefully you can still hear me now. So also the FFL recognition is included in a number of other statewide initiatives. And these include the Fair Housing Tax Credit, which is a 10-year tax credit to the developer of a new or renovated low-income multifamily community. So if their landscape is recognized as Florida friendly, they earn 2 points towards the certification. FFL is included in Florida Green Building Coalition's certification requirements. Also, provides points towards the total. 1000 Friends of Florida, the Florida 2070 project, determined that if we keep developing the way we do now, by 2070, more than a third of Florida's lands will be developed, and the development-related water demand will more than double. So some of the recommendations include expanding public water conservation efforts, including both the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program to promote greater water conservation, and requiring Florida Waterstar or other water conservation technology in all new development. And another metric that Florida Friendly Landscaping is used in is the FDEP Basin Management Action Plans, which is BMAPs. These quantify non-point source nitrogen loading to select drainage areas and basins in Florida. These BMAPs credit the FFL program with reducing up to 3% of the starting nitrogen load to this, identified basin. This represents about 76,000 pounds of nitrogen-based non-point source pollution that has been kept out of Florida waters each year due to the FFL program. So those are some of the kind of larger impacts of FFL. Next, I'm going to talk about the Green Industries Best Management Practices Program, also known as GIBMP. This is an educational program for people working in the lawn care and landscape maintenance industry. The GIBMP program teaches environmentally safe landscaping practices that help conserve water and protect Florida's ground and surface water resources. So the statement in the name of this, the protection of water resources by green industries, I think this is important because it really signifies that the green industries play a leading role in protecting Florida's water resources. And they do this by implementing the BMPs. So how each one of you does your job, every day, it matters. And, we're recognizing that even in the title of this document. So as I mentioned earlier, the GIBMP program is also written into the Florida statute, and it's, Florida Statute 482.1562. The statute mandates that all commercial fertilizer applicators in the state of Florida complete the GIBMP training program and then obtain a license from the Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Resources before applying fertilizer in a commercial setting. So this all became mandatory in 2014. The training was developed, in collaboration with the Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Services, with Florida Department of Environmental Protection, with representatives from the green industry, and then the University of Florida IFAS. So, working together, they all came up with the BMPs for the industry and developed, this whole GIBMP program. The GIBMP training methods consist of, you can get it online, in person, DVD, and now in live Zoom trainings. In-person classes are held at, usually held at a county extension office, sometimes other locations throughout the state. You can find the statewide training schedule and registration information on our website. So you can just, plug in, what county or counties, are nearby. And then it'll list all the classes that are, coming up and available to you. So, once again, I would just refer you to our website on the GIBMP training page to get more information on that. The training is available. We're currently offering it in English and Spanish, and we're going to be offering it again in Creole very soon. We had it in Creole, and now we'll start that back up again soon. And the process is if you go to the 1 day in-person training, it consists of 6 GIBMP training modules covering the efficient use of water and fertilizer, integrated pest management, lawn and cultural practices. So, it's about a 6-hour training day, but after passing the test at the end of the training, the individual will be given a certificate of training. And this certificate allows you to, go to FDAX and apply to get the fertilizer license. So that's the process. We also have 3 regional coordinators throughout the state to help you. And if you've already completed the GIBMP training and you would like to become an instructor, they can help you do that as well, because we have, private industry instructors that are a huge help to, implementing GIBMP throughout the state. So these are the contact people, depending on where you live. And you can maybe write down their information, or we can we can put that in the chat box a little later. So next, I'm going to talk about a relatively new program. We just really started this in full in 2020. So this is a voluntary designation given to individuals who have completed the required training in FFL principles and are familiar with the latest UF IFAS recommendations. These trained professionals have demonstrated the ability to recognize and address common landscape issues, and address them by using environmentally sustainable landscape management practices. So it's Florida Friendly Landscaping Certified Professional, or the acronym we use is FFLCP, with all those other acronyms that are floating out there. And, I just like to talk about, there's a number of other landscape certifications available. And we are really just working to support those certifications that are out there and, just to, help amplify them. The other certifications are, to the best of my knowledge, FFLCP is the only landscape certification that addresses water quality. So, there could be some other technical resources out there, on, irrigation or, growing or installing landscapes, but ours is the one that focuses on really water quality is the main goal of ours. So we want to supplement and augment these other certifications that are out there. The FFLCP really was intended for code enforcement agents to be able to identify what is and isn't Florida friendly and to provide clarification on FFL legislation. However, we have seen an interest from landscape architects and designers, as well as green industry professionals, as a way to promote their educational training and marketability. So, so this program is is growing, and we're proud of what we're doing with this program. If you want more information on it, go to our website, and I'll also put that in the chat, the link to that in the chat box once I'm done. I don't even see my chat box anymore. I've lost it. So to get certified as a Florida Friendly Landscaping Certified Professional, you must complete 6 online classes and a field module. And then there'll be a test at the end and a code of ethics to sign. So if you hold another landscape certification, such as an FNGLA certification or a GIBMP certification or Waterstar, then you don't have to take all 6 of these classes. You'll take 2 or 3 of them, kind of depending on which certification you have. So if you have any questions with that, I would be the person to talk to. Please feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in becoming an FFL certified professional. We have a training coming up. We have an online field module coming up on December 3rd. So we think this will be the last online field module we'll be offering, and then it will go to strictly in-personal. And we expect those in person. We expect those to be regional trainings coming up, so it may not be in your county, but it would be in a neighboring county. And we've done the online ones for the past year due to COVID, but we'd really like to get those back to the face-to-face trainings for you get a great interaction when you're actually talking to other people live rather than on a Zoom meeting. As great as Zoom is, and I really do like Zoom. I think I'm looking forward to these being in person again. So to take a breath here. So in addition, we partnered with Florida Waterstar to develop the Florida Friendly Waterstar Gold certification. So where the FFLCP was for people, this certification is for homes. And it'll combine components of both Florida Waterstar Gold and Florida Friendly Landscaping Gold recognitions to create a certification that includes site development criteria to reduce non-point source pollution. It'll encourage plant diversity, and it will also encourage water conservation criteria. Something else that's a little different about this certification is that it includes a post-certification education component. So, it'll be connecting with the homeowners and, giving them a folder, giving them, people to reach out to if they have questions about the maintenance of their landscape. And, the folder will provide the recommendations for taking care of their specific landscape. So we think that'll be, a very good addition to this certification program. To develop this, we collaborated with UF faculty, the Florida Waterstar Technical Advisory Committee members, Triconic, and landscape industry professionals to develop and revise the criteria for this Florida Friendly Waterstar Gold certification. We plan on pilot testing this certification hopefully by the end of the year. Things have been a little slower with all the pressure on the housing development and supply chain issues. So we were hoping to get it done by the end of this year. It may be the beginning of next year that we get this pilot test done. But the homes will be certified through Florida Waterstar Administrators. Triconic is how that certification will be administered. So now what I'm going to do is, how am I doing on time? Okay, I'm doing okay. I'm almost done here. I'm going to, kind of just finish up with a few examples of Florida Friendly in communities and some success stories. So I'll start off with Sumter County. The Village's Government Annex in Sumter County Public Library. They had annuals, and they were replaced those annuals with Florida Friendly perennials that were drought tolerant, and the plants were suited, they were the right plants for the right place. So prior to replacing these, the annual beds were installed 4 times a year. The maintenance included irrigation, fertilization, weeding, pest control, and deadheading plants to keep them aesthetically pleasing. And what the renovations did were the annuals were replaced with perennials, so a very easy retrofit. And these perennials, required far less maintenance than the annuals, and they ended up saving almost $3,000 a year by this very simple, substitution. The next one I'm going to talk about is Tamarind Village. This is a 47-acre, 177 home community in Broward County. So after consulting with their local UF-IFAS extension agent, they started following the recommendations and were able to cut the water use in a third, the fertilizer and pesticide use in a half. And they did all this without sacrificing the look of the landscape. So I think this before and after picture, is a really great example, where they just let the shrubs kind of grow to their natural form rather than, over pruning them. So, with these changes, they saw a pretty staggering $33,000 annual savings on their, between their water, fertilizer, and pesticide use. Another example is in Ocean Hammock. This is a 1,000-acre community in Flagler County, so it's big. Medians are kind of notoriously a harsh environment for keeping, turf alive, and their turf kept failing in the medians. So they replaced it with a hardy ground cover, and they were able to install micro irrigation too as a result of using that ground cover. So they also reduced the number of times they rotated their annuals from 4 times a year to 2. And they used to hurricane cut their palms 2 times a year. And now they only remove the dead fronds once a year. And just that event alone, the not hurricane cutting the palms, saves $25,000 a year on that single event alone. And hurricane cutting is not recommended by UF-IFAS. The fronds actually, keep supplying nutrients and things to the tree. So we really only recommend removing those dead brown fronds and not hurricane cutting them. There's another example in Broward County. This is a community that had 5 miles of ficus hedges. So this was a lot of ficus, but they were infested with whiteflies, and they were spending, this number is so staggering, I can't even really wrap my head around it, but they were spending $100,000 a year to prevent and treat the whitefly infestation. So they ended up removing that monoculture of ficus, and they replaced it with a diverse hedge of different types of, shrubs. And they'll see a return on their investment in 3 years, and continue to realize that maintenance savings in the years to come. So I think this is a great success story in reducing the amount of pesticides being used in this community. Wellington in Spring Hills, this community is the highest water using community in the county. And this is really about implementing the right plant for the right place. And so this turf was continuing to fail because it had take all root rot. So what this community did was there's 4 homes that were being pilot tested to replace their St. Augustine that was continually being reinfected with root rot with Bahia. And the people in this community, this is a maintenance-free community. So, there's one single landscape maintenance company that takes care of everybody's yards, and they would also replace the turf as well. But people who needed their yards replaced were often waiting, 9 months to a year to get their replacement turf. So they just really needed to do something. This is still in the works, and we're waiting for the final results. But we did do some surveying, and people are much happier with the look of the landscape. Basically, just having some grass that is living is much preferable to a lot of dead grass, I think. The community is also changing their codes to allow for Bahia, where before it was limited to St. Augustine. I think I'm not going to show this video right now because I want to have some time to answer questions at the end. So the last thing I'd like to talk about is the Florida Friendly Landscaping Awards program, and I would like to really encourage you to submit an application. The deadline is November 21st, so you still have some time. It's a pretty quick application where you can fill in the information that you have and upload your pictures to our website. We have awards for residential landscape. So if your own landscape is great, or if you're working with a landscape that you're proud of, I would recommend that you submit that landscape. We have an award for new construction, for commercial landscapes, for FFL communities, edible gardens, also before and after pictures. If you have any of those, we have an award for that. Or a specialty garden, if you've installed a rain garden, or maybe maybe a vegetable garden, something like that. Those would be good candidates for the specialty garden application. If you're a utilities company employee, or if you work for a city or a county, if you have an educational campaign that you've been working on, that's a new category for us too. And these are just a couple examples of the past winners. So this was the commercial landscape winner. This is in Miami-Dade County. They worked with their extension office, so they have a very efficient irrigation system. You can see that they've used ground cover, I think, really effectively in these small areas. And then also they have lots of permeable pavement, are some of the highlights of that commercial landscape. This is a residential landscape. This is just, I think a great example of having some plant material in that buffer zone before the water. And this, I'm happy to say, this won the Mature Landscape Award and, for our last award ceremony, which was in 2019. But this is going to be used in a lot of our new publications and materials. So that's another benefit of, submitting your application. Here's the before and after, which I think is fun. So before they started and then when they finished up. And with that, I used up almost all my time. That is all I have. I'm going to try to find the chat. I don't know if you guys can unmute yourselves or not, but I will try to address some of these in the chat box. It might be kind of hard. Okay, I see Caesar is answering some questions on here. Yeah, I should have had Caesar be a co-presenter with me. So yeah, I'm sorry, this is not the most efficient way to do this, but someone is asking about the drip irrigation and another head for spray system. Where can I find the second type of head to install? I've not heard of that head. Need to check it out. Yes, so the multi-spray, multi-trajectory, those should be available at your local irrigation supply store, and you can ask for an efficient irrigation head. They may not be available at the box stores, but if you go to an irrigation supply store, you should be able to find that without any problem. And I think I see a question about how long does GIB&P training last? When do you need to retake the course? Oh, and Caesar answered that. Yeah, you do not need to take the GIB&P training. There is an FFLCP manual, and I'd be happy to provide that to people. I should probably put that on our website is actually what I'll do. I will upload that manual to our website and make it available that way. I'm taking a note. The training for FFLCP is live. We have a lot of interaction with the attendees. So I'd really encourage you to, come attend our training. Now you have to complete the prerequisites before you can attend the online field module. Yes, you can use this recording for your Master Gardener training. Okay, so I think I may have answered all the questions. So there are, I see a question from Francisco. There are CEUs for certified arborists, but not all of them. So I hope when we are developing our list for next year, I want to get at least 2 or 3 ISA CEUs on there. Again, we had, I think, 3 this year, and I would like to continue at least having 3 CEUs for arborists on there. Okay, and I think that's it. Thank you all so much for being here today, and it's right at 11 o'clock, so thank you so much. If you are waiting on a CEU, we will be sending those out, and you should get them before the end of the week. Thank you, everybody.